subscribe, like, share, and don't forget to press the bell icon. The fog rolled in just past midnight, thick like soup, swallowing sound, light, and time itself. It didn't creep like a whisper or drift like mist on a lake. It surged, sudden and full, like something had exhaled after centuries of silence. Daniel had never seen fog like this in all his 38 years of living near Hollow Pine Valley. The town sat in the crook of a forested basin, sleepy and unremarkable, a place where things never changed. But the fog brought with it something foreign, something not meant for human eyes. He first noticed it when the power flickered in his cabin. A strong wind slammed the shutters, then nothing, absolute stillness. Then, like spilled milk over black silk, the fog oozed across his window pane, blotting out the moonlight, snuffing the world beyond. He grabbed his flashlight and coat, peered outside. No sound, not even crickets, just the heavy blanket of white pressing against the porch steps like it was waiting for permission to come in. Fog was natural, sure, but this listened. It pulsed, breathed, and it wasn't wet. The air was dry, brittle, like standing in the wake of something burning too cold to see. He stepped out cautiously, boots crunching on frozen leaves. The fog didn't drift, it held, unmoving, as if space itself had paused. Even his flashlight beam disappeared after 2 feet, swallowed whole. "Hello?" he called out, instantly regretting it. His voice didn't echo, it fell dead, eaten by the white. A shape flickered far off, tall, narrow. He blinked, it was gone. When he turned back to the house, it looked off. The windows too dark, the frame not quite where he left it. He took a step forward and suddenly felt like he'd taken 100. The porch vanished behind him, trees pressed closer, and then came the hum, a low thrumming sound, not quite mechanical, not quite human, like a chorus of whispers buried beneath the soil, vibrating through his bones. He wasn't alone. He shouldn't have left the house. The air now smelled faintly of rust and wet stone. Shapes began forming in the fog, not visible, but sensed. Presence, mass, movement, watching, always just outside view. Daniel's breath grew shallow. He turned slowly in place, unsure where he was. Every direction looked the same. He hadn't walked far, had he? Then suddenly, a scream, short, sharp, from deep within the white, a child's scream, and worse, he recognized it. It was his niece Ellie, but Ellie died 3 years ago, in a winter car crash, near this very valley. Daniel bolted toward the sound, his instincts overriding sense. He ran blindly through the fog, his flashlight sputtering, the trees narrowing, like jaws. Another scream, closer. He shouted her name, but only silence answered. Then movement, something darted across his periphery. He spun, nothing. Then another figure, far off. He aimed his light, and saw her, Ellie, her back to him, in the same blue jacket she wore the day she died, soaked with melting snow. He cried. She didn't move. She stood perfectly still. Then her head tilted, not turned, tilted, at an unnatural angle, too far. He stepped back, heart hammering. She turned slowly, her face pale, mouth sewn shut, with something that looked like hair. Her eyes were full white, no pupils. She opened her mouth wide, threads snapping, and screamed again. Not a sound, but a feeling, a pressure wave. Daniel fell backward, ears ringing, eyes watering. He scrambled to his feet, but she was gone. Only fog. Something whispered behind him. Not a word, a sensation. Welcome back. He ran, not knowing where he was going. Every turn took him deeper. The forest grew thicker but wrong. The trees bent in impossible directions, their trunks rippling slightly, like breathing. At one point, he saw a man nailed into the side of an elm, mouth open, eyes bulging, body wrapped in vines with fog, pouring from his sockets like smoke. He screamed again, but the scream never left his throat. He opened his mouth, and only fog came out. Cold, thick, choking fog. Daniel collapsed, clutching his chest, vision spinning. Then silence. Time skipped. He was on the ground, face in dirt. Hours, minutes, no way to tell. He heard laughter now, dozens of voices, all familiar, all wrong. He rose slowly, knees shaking. Around him, vague human shapes began to emerge, half visible, their edges smudged, their forms quivering. They circled him. Some were missing arms, others dragged extra legs behind them, torsos bent backwards. Not ghosts, not people, something remembering people, and they all had the same stitched mouths, eyes whited out. They mouthed words he couldn't hear, not sound, just fog. One stepped forward. He recognized the face, his brother, dead, 5 years now. Then another, his high school friend, who vanished in these very woods. The more he looked, the more faces he knew, lost, long buried, forgotten, or so he thought. They weren't dead, they were held, suspended in this mist, their souls stitched into the white. They didn't die in the world, they were taken from it, and now the fog wanted him too. The circle closed in. He screamed, but the sound curled back into his throat. The fog was inside him now, sliding down, rooting in his lungs. He felt cold fingers in his chest, not physically, but in a memory of pain. Something was writing inside him. He looked down. His arms were covered in frost, but beneath the frost, words were etching themselves. Names, hundreds of names, carved by unseen force. Every person lost in the fog before him. He was the next record. The fog was keeping count. Then a whisper, clear this time, in his niece's voice. We live in the fog now. The circle vanished. The forest was gone. Daniel was alone again, or so he thought, because now he couldn't find his house. He turned in slow circles. No trail, no path, just fog, and footsteps, not his, right behind him. Daniel didn't run, not this time. He froze, standing so still he could hear the beat of his heart, loud, fast, like it was trying to escape his chest. The footsteps behind him stopped, when his own breath did. He felt it now, not just a presence, but proximity, inches, close enough to touch, close enough to hear it think. The fog curled around him like fingers, dragging cold across his skin, down his spine, as if someone was exhaling directly into his bones. His flashlight, long dead, now flared once, just once, and in that single blink of light, he saw a shape behind him. No eyes, no mouth, a blank face stretched too wide across the skull. It wasn't a person, it was the idea of a person, carved from memory, and stitched together by whatever lived in this endless white. Daniel spun and swung blindly with the flashlight, hitting nothing, but the fog reacted, shuddering outward, as though disturbed. Something hissed, something not air, something alive. His instincts kicked in again, and he stumbled forward. No path, just movement, just a way. But it didn't matter. The landscape was folding in on itself. Every tree looked like the last. Every direction smelled of decay and snowmelt. There were no sounds, except for what followed, and the more he moved, the more the fog showed him. A doorway appeared suddenly, standing alone in the mist, freestanding, rotted wood, no wall or house around it, just a door, slightly ajar, bleeding black mist from the crack. Without thinking, he stepped through it. Was it set frame? Instantly, he was somewhere else, not outside, not inside, a place in between. The floor beneath him was damp and soft, like walking on flesh. The air thickened, not just fog now, but noise, muffled voices, dozens, humming tunelessly, like a broken lullaby. The room spun. He looked up. Thousands of bodies were embedded in the ceiling, not dead, sleeping. Their eyes twitched, their mouths moved slightly, as if speaking in dream. They floated inside the fog, like being held in a thick, milky soup, preserved.
He recognized one, a hiker who'd gone missing years ago, another, the town librarian, then another, then his own face, suspended above him, eyes closed, gently moving with the pulse of the fog. He gasped, turned. There was no door behind him anymore, only wall, molded moist wall that breathed. He pressed his hands to it, and it felt like skin. He pulled away in horror. The room laughed. No voices, just sound, like air being sucked through lungs that didn't belong to anything. A corridor stretched to the left now, narrow and full of low-hanging fog that swirled with faces, faces that screamed silently when you looked too long. Daniel walked it. He didn't choose to. His legs moved on their own, like remembering a nightmare too old to forget. Each step echoed with whispers. He passed rooms with cracked doors. In one, he saw a child drawing fog onto walls in blood. In another, a man kneeling before a hole in the floor, whispering prayers to something unseen. Then he passed a mirror, and in it, he saw himself. Only, it wasn't him. The reflection moved slower. It smiled when he didn't, and its eyes were hollow. Fog leaked from the corners of its mouth. It raised its hand slowly, pointing behind him. Daniel turned. Nothing. He looked back. The mirror was gone. Now he stood in a large circular chamber, lit by fog alone. In the center stood a pillar of smoke, spinning slowly, like a cyclone. Inside it, images flickered, moments from his past, his father's funeral, the crash that killed Ellie, a memory of lying in bed during a snowstorm, hearing whispers outside the window when no one was home. The fog was feeding, pulling his memories out like threads. He felt them unraveling. The more he watched, the more he forgot why he had come here, what he was looking for, what his name was. He clutched his head and screamed, but his scream came out as laughter. He tried again, louder, and this time it came out as a hymn. The fog was rewriting him. Then he saw her, not Ellie, not the reflection, something else. She stood tall, draped in robes made of fog, her face hidden behind a veil of mist. Around her, dozens of floating hands twitched like dead spiders. Her presence was unbearable. The fog bowed to her. She stepped forward, her feet leaving no prints, her head tilted, slowly. When she spoke, it wasn't sound, it was a memory, placed inside his head. You came where none return. Now you are ours. Now you remember. Daniel fell to his knees. His mind burned. Images that weren't his flashed inside his skull. Centuries of faces, all swallowed by fog. He saw ancient rituals in ice-covered temples. He saw people walking willingly into the mist, whispering praise. He saw entire towns lost beneath the white, their names erased from maps. The fog wasn't weather, it was sentient, a consciousness that fed on presence. It didn't kill, it kept. People didn't die in the fog, they became part of it, remembered by it, echoed forever. He looked up, and she was gone, the room gone. He stood now, in the middle of Hollow Pine's empty streets. But something was wrong. The buildings looked abandoned for decades. The sky was the same dull gray, but unmoving. Time didn't exist here anymore. He saw people, outlines of them, moving through routines, like broken clockwork. A mailman, walking in circles. A woman sweeping the same patch of ground. A boy riding a bike through an invisible loop. All stitched into this mockery of life. Puppets of memory. Daniel was back in the town, but not the real one. This was the fog's copy, a museum of those it claimed, and he was part of the exhibit now. He walked to the post office, and saw his name carved into the wall, over and over. He entered his old childhood home, except it wasn't built yet. When he was a kid, the fog had built a version from his recollection. Wrong dimensions, wrong colors, a copy made by something that understood memory, but not meaning. Inside, everything was still. His old room, his bed, a photograph of him as a boy, except he had no mouth in it, no eyes, just fog where his face should be. Then he heard it again, the humming, from upstairs, the lullaby, the same one Ellie used to hum. He climbed slowly, fog thickening with each step, until the door at the top opened on its own. Inside the room, Ellie sat on the bed, smiling, lips sewn back together. She raised her hand and pointed to the window. Outside, the fog rose higher. She whispered into his mind, "We never leave. We just wait for more." And Daniel understood. The fog never moves alone. It takes one at a time. And he was the newest whisper. The air shifted again, not like weather, but like a decision being made. Daniel stood still, surrounded by frozen versions of life, people made of smoke and memory, playing their roles in a dead town. The fog here wasn't just a veil anymore. It was a curator. It remembered everything. It displayed what it chose, buried what it didn't. This copy of Hollow Pine was no longer a prison. It was a performance, an eternal stage, with Daniel now cast as a permanent resident. Every breath he took felt borrowed. Every thought echoed like it didn't belong to him. Somewhere, deep within the mist, something else was thinking with him. He started walking again, not because he thought he'd escape, but because stopping felt worse. The fog reacted to movement, like it enjoyed hope, before extinguishing it. He passed the church, its bell hanging twisted, wrapped in thorny vines that hadn't been there before. Inside, rows of fog people knelt, heads down, their mouths moving in silence. One turned to him. Its face was his own. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing nothing but empty sockets, leaking white mist. Then it smiled. A cruel smile, and raised its hand. The rest followed, and together, they began to chant something in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. Not forgotten, never freed, hollow breath, eternal need. The fog around them pulsed with every syllable. It wasn't just a chant, it was a summon. The room started to bend, literally bent. The pews warped, the stained glass wept, and then the floor split open like a wound, revealing nothing below but more fog, spiraling downward forever. Daniel backed away, heart thudding. He tried to scream, but the sound fell flat, swallowed before it reached air. Something below the fog screamed back though, a shriek so full of hunger and rage it bent time. He ran, this time, not for hope, but for sanity. The world shifted again. No roads, no town, just white, endless white, until he stumbled into another building, one that hadn't existed before, a small theater. It stood in the fog like a tumor, too clean, too deliberate. The marquee above read, "Now showing you." Daniel stepped inside, and the doors slammed shut behind him. The lobby was full of fog specters, their heads twisting slowly toward him, their mouths locked open in silent screams. He moved past them into the theater hall. The screen flickered to life on its own. There, projected in monochrome, was his entire life, moment by moment, frame by frame. But it wasn't accurate. It was off. Every person he knew looked wrong, like actors in skin masks. Their eyes too wide, their movements jerky. In the film, he saw himself being swallowed by fog over and over in different ways. Sometimes in a car, sometimes in bed, sometimes just walking into it smiling. The last scene showed him sitting right where he was now, watching the film. The real horror began when the camera on screen turned around and looked back at him, and he blinked. Not the projection, him. Daniel blinked, and the screen version smiled, knowingly. He wasn't watching a movie. He was being studied, judged, erased. As the lights dimmed, the fog rolled in through the vents, wrapping around his body like chains. He tried to scream, but choked instead. In front of him, one by one, seats filled with copies of himself, all versions from possible lives. An old man, a child, a corpse, a smiling stranger. They all turned to him in unison. In perfect sync, they whispered, "You belong to us now." And Daniel knew the truth. The fog wasn't feeding on his soul. It was feeding on his potential, on what he could have been, on alternate versions of his life, consuming possibilities to sustain its twisted eternity. That's why time didn't move here, because it branched inwards. Every path he never took, every choice he didn't make, was kept alive here, tortured, displayed, consumed. His knees buckled. He was no longer one person. He was infinite self, all swallowed by this thing, and it wasn't done yet. Daniel didn't know how long he sat in the theater, watching his life unravel across a screen that now seemed fused to the walls of his mind. Time didn't tick here. It dripped, heavy and meaningless. The fog had begun to whisper directly into his skull, not through words, but through images, suggestions, and sensation. It was showing him futures, not one, but all. In each one, he was devoured, not always physically, but in spirit, swallowed by decisions he hadn't yet made, or might never make. The fog had access to everything, including the versions of him that had never been born. It fed on them, savored their regret, their despair. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a library of lives that could have been, now suspended forever in white. In one corner of his vision, Daniel saw himself as a father, reaching out to a child that didn't exist anymore. In another, he was old and alone, whispering names no one answered to. He saw himself standing at the altar, about to marry someone he'd never met. He saw himself dying, at 15, in a car crash that hadn't happened, but nearly did. These weren't just dreams, they were memories of possibilities, echoing eternally, in the thick atmosphere. The fog was a parasite, but it didn't kill, it preserved. That was worse. It made Daniel realize the worst fate wasn't death, it was unresolution, being fragmented into endless mapes, and trapped inside them like a mirror maze, with no exit. And then came the voice, not a whisper, not a scream, but a flood of sound from every direction, and none at once. It said one word, choose. Daniel collapsed. Choose what? What did he have left to offer? The fog didn't care for obedience, it wanted a decision, a submission, a preference for one fate over the rest, because once he did that, it could prune the others, cut the threads of possibility, and feast on what remained. And he almost did it. Almost picked a version of himself he liked best, almost gave it what it wanted, but then he remembered something small, his name. It felt insignificant at first, but it held weight. Daniel wasn't just a label, it was an anchor, a declaration. He existed, right here, right now, not as a future, not as a ghost of might-have-beens, but as someone alive. And with that tiny seed of resistance, he stood. The fog hissed, angry, confused. The copies of him began to twitch and blur. The screen cracked down the middle. Somewhere above, the ceiling roared like a collapsing mountain. He stepped forward, not running, not hiding. He walked into the screen. What happened next couldn't be measured. Time inverted, space bent. He found himself not in a place, but in a moment. A core inside the fog, a heart. And in that heart was something unexpected. A child, a small girl, maybe 8. With empty black eyes, and a smile too wide for her face. She held a music box, and wore a torn winter coat. Around her, thousands of faces hovered, distorted, watching. She looked at Daniel and said, I made this fog, because I was forgotten. The realization slammed into him. This wasn't a curse, it was a cry, a broken soul, screaming across dimension. She was the first, the one who got lost in the snow long ago. No one found her. No one looked long enough. The fog came after, built from her pain, her loneliness, her fury. It pulled in others, preserved them, but she didn't know how to let them go. Daniel knelt down, voice trembling. You're not alone anymore. And in that moment, everything shattered. The fog screamed,
Not in anger, but in release.
The girl vanished. The theater exploded into light. The snow fell backward into the sky. The town unfolded in reverse. And Daniel awoke at the edge of the road, alone, frostbitten, clutching a broken music box in his hand. No fog, no town, just silence. But deep within the wind, he thought he heard a girl's voice, whispering, thank you. And he knew. The fog wasn't gone, it just remembered him now, forever.